My name is Natalie Mercer, and I learned on my wedding night that betrayal does not always arrive with a shout. Sometimes it wears a tailored navy suit, kisses your mother on the cheek, and stands close enough to your champagne glass to block the view from the table cameras. Sometimes it smiles at 200 guests as if it is carrying a blessing, while its right hand opens a folded silver packet beneath the linen edge. Sometimes it waits until the room smells like roses, buttercream, and polished oak before deciding that your joy is an insult it cannot survive. I saw my brother do it. Not in a corner of my imagination, not because I was nervous, dramatic, or too sensitive, which had been my family's favorite words for me since I was old enough to defend myself. I saw Bennett Mercer tilt his hand over my glass at exactly 8:17 p.m. while the band tuned their guitars and my new husband, Owen Price, was being pulled into a photo with his college friends near the barn doors. The powder vanished into the bubbles so cleanly that for 1 second I wondered how many times he had practiced. Then he looked at me and smiled. My first instinct was not fear. That surprised me later. Fear came after, in private, when the deputies were outside and my hands finally had permission to shake. In that moment, standing behind the head table at Copper Ridge Estate in Boulder County, Colorado, I felt something colder and more useful than fear slide into place behind my ribs. Recognition. Bennett had been setting a trap. The glass was not the whole trap. It was just the hinge. I did not scream. I did not grab his wrist. I did not announce to the room that my older brother, the golden son of the Mercer family, had just dropped something into the bride's champagne. I reached for the glass, lifted it as if I were admiring the tiny stream of bubbles, and waited until Bennett turned toward our parents with that practiced half bow he used when he wanted people to think charm was character. Then I switched our glasses. One quiet movement, 1 inch of lace brushing against the tablecloth, one crystal flute replacing another beside a place card printed with Bennett's name in gold foil. That was all. When the toast began, I held a plain glass of water. Bennett lifted the champagne meant for me and looked across the room like a man who believed the universe had already agreed with him. My mother dabbed at the corner of her eye. My father looked proud and tired. Owen returned to my side and touched the small of my back. Bennett tapped the microphone. "To my little sister," he said, his voice warm enough to fool anyone who had never heard the knife under it. "May tonight be full of surprises." A few people laughed. I smiled. Bennett drank. 28 minutes later, his fingers began to tremble around the microphone, and the projector behind him lit up with a folder named "The Bride They Don't Know." By the time we were adults, Bennett did not need to steal obvious things. He had learned to steal atmosphere. If I received praise, he made it sound like pity. If I made a careful decision, he called it controlling. If I stayed calm, he called it cold. If I cried, he called it proof. That was his art. He was 34 on my wedding day, 6 years older than me, handsome in the expensive way that came from family money and never paying consequences on time. He ran Mercer Outdoor Supply, at least on paper, though most of the real accounting had been handled for years by a bookkeeper who smelled like peppermint gum and looked nervous every time Bennett entered a room. I worked as a compliance auditor for a medical equipment distributor in Denver, which meant my days were full of invoices, chain of custody forms, vendor portals, federal purchasing rules, and numbers that either matched or did not. Numbers have no favorite child. My grandmother, Ruth Mercer, understood that. She had left me 40% oversight authority of the family land trust because, in her words, Natalie reads the small print before it becomes a fire. The trust owned Copper Ridge Estate, 2 hayfields, 3 rental cabins, and the old stone house where my father had been born. Bennett received an equal future inheritance, but not equal control, and he never forgave me for that distinction. He called it theft. 3 nights before the wedding, he phoned me at 11:42 p.m. I remember the time because I was sitting on the kitchen floor surrounded by place cards, and Owen had fallen asleep at the table with a pen in his hand. Bennett's voice was soft, almost tender. "You are building a life on attention you stole," he said. I should have told Owen. I should have told my father. I should have called our attorney, Marianne Vale, right then and asked her to freeze every trust access point until after the wedding. But a foolish, stubborn part of me still wanted one day untouched by Mercer history. I wanted to believe my brother would not bring war into a room full of flowers and vows. That was my mistake. Then the reception began, and Bennett became too calm. That was always the first warning. Bennett angry was careless. Bennett charming was dangerous. He moved between tables with a champagne flute, laughing with cousins, leaning over elderly aunts, accepting compliments on the wedding as if he had designed the sunset himself. When a guest told my father the estate looked magnificent, Bennett said, "Natalie is good at spending other people's money." People laughed because they thought it was a joke. I did not. The second warning came when Mara found me near the dessert display, where the air smelled like lemon curd and hot sugar. She pressed her phone flat against her palm, her face tight. "Why is Bennett asking the DJ about a second presentation?" she whispered. I looked across the barn. The DJ, a young man named Trevor, stood beside the projector table with his headphones around his neck and confusion on his face. Bennett was pointing at a laptop that was not ours. We had approved one video, 90 seconds of childhood photos, my grandmother dancing with my father, Owen's parents in old vacation pictures, nothing else. There was no second presentation. Bennett saw me watching and lifted his glass. A private salute. The third warning wore a black vest and a fake name tag. Our hired bartender was supposed to be Carmen Rivas from Bluebell Events. The man behind the bar that night was older, broad-shouldered, with gray hair and a nervous habit of wiping the same clean spot on the counter. His name tag said Daniel. I had never met him. At 8:11 p.m., I asked Denise, the venue manager, about the substitution. Denise was the kind of woman who wore sensible shoes with formal clothes and remembered every clause in a contract. She frowned, checked her tablet, and said, "That is not our vendor." 6 minutes later, Bennett slipped the packet into my glass. So when he drank from the switched flute, I did not feel triumph. I felt the beginning of a file opening in my mind. Event time, 8:17 p.m. Location, head table, east side, under camera B4. Witness proximity, bride, possibly server, possibly cousin table. Suspect, Bennett Mercer. Immediate action, preserve evidence, prevent panic, identify second-stage attack. That is what auditors do. We do not pray the numbers change. We follow them until they confess. The first document hit the room at 8:45 p.m. The projector screen glowed white, then blue, then filled with a cropped bank transfer that made my father inhale sharply. My name was circled in red. The amount was $68,400. The caption read, "Trust funds moved by Natalie Mercer without family approval." The barn went quiet in sections. First the head table, then the relatives nearest the dance floor. Then the back tables, where people stopped laughing, not because they understood, but because silence spreads faster than truth. The smell of grilled steak and candles suddenly felt heavy. Somewhere near the bar, a glass touched wood with a tiny, guilty sound. Bennett gripped the microphone. His face had lost color, but his smile remained pinned in place. "I'm sorry," he said, looking out at the guests. "I did not want to do this tonight, but my sister has built an image that is not honest, and our family deserves transparency." My mother whispered, "Bennett, what are you doing?" My father stared at the screen as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into mercy. I looked at the transfer and almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was sloppy. The $68,400 was real. 2 years earlier, a spring flood had damaged the east irrigation line and the roof of Cabin 3. I had authorized emergency repairs with Marianne Vale's approval, and the trust had been reimbursed by insurance 17 business days later. Bennett had cropped out the invoice numbers, the adjuster's email, and my father's digital approval code. He had not created a lie from nothing. He had carved a lie out of truth. Mara appeared at my side with her phone. "He sent it to the family group chat, too," she whispered. "From an unknown number. 12 people already have it." "Screenshot everything," I said. "You're not going to stop him?" Not yet. She stared at me as if I had turned into someone she did not recognize. Maybe I had. The old Natalie would have rushed from table to table, explaining, pleading, proving the clean shape of her own hands. The old Natalie had spent years believing that if she laid out enough evidence, her parents would finally stop choosing Bennett's feelings over reality. The old Natalie was not wearing my dress anymore. I looked at Mara and said, "He needs me unstable. He needs me frightened. He needs me correcting him before he finishes building the lie." Mara swallowed. "And what do you need?" "I need the whole lie on record." That was when Bennett clicked to the next slide. The screen showed an email from my account. At least, it looked that way at first glance. It was addressed to a loan officer at Front Range Community Bank, referencing a temporary collateral adjustment against the trust property. My stomach tightened, not from fear this time, but from recognition of a deeper crime. I had never sent that email. Bennett's voice thickened slightly. Whatever had been in the champagne was moving through him now, slowing his tongue, loosening the careful bolts of his performance. "Natalie did not just move money," he said. "She used the estate as collateral without proper consent. She lied to our parents. She lied to the man she married today." Owen stepped closer to me. "Tell me what you need." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Is this true?" Not, "Maybe there's an explanation." Tell me what you need. In that moment, the entire marriage became real. "Find Denise," I said quietly. "Ask her to preserve all camera feeds from 7:45 onward. Then bring Trevor, the DJ, to the projector table. Do not touch the laptop. Do not let Bennett's bartender leave." Owen nodded once and moved. I went to the bridal suite. Inside, the laughter and murmurs became muffled behind the thick oak door. The room smelled like hairspray, vanilla lotion, and the coffee Mara had abandoned that morning. My emergency folder sat inside my overnight bag, wrapped in a red leather binder Owen used to tease me about. "Only you would bring audit paperwork to your wedding," he had said. Only me. Inside were printed trust summaries, insurance reimbursements, repair invoices, approval emails, the vendor contract, the bar staffing sheet, and a notarized letter from Marianne Vale confirming my authority over emergency expenditures up to $90,000. I had packed the binder not because I expected a public trial, but because Bennett had taught me that family events were safest when paper traveled with me. I called Marianne. She answered on the third ring, breathless. "Natalie?" "I need you on speaker in 5 minutes," I said. "Bennett is presenting altered trust documents at my reception. He may have forged emails using my name, and someone tampered with my drink." There was 1 second of silence. Then the lawyer in her arrived. "Do not accuse him with adjectives," she said. "Use nouns. Document, timestamp, witness, access. Preserve the glass. Preserve the file. I am logging into the trust archive now." "Thank you." "And Natalie?" "Yes. Stay boring. Boring survives court." I almost smiled. When I returned to the reception, Bennett had reached his third slide. His forehead shone with sweat. The folder behind him contained more files. Trust misuse, bride emails, ranch debt, Owen warning. The last one made my skin go cold, but not enough to rush. Rushing was what he wanted. My father stood halfway from his chair, one hand braced on the table. "Bennett," he said, "stop this." Bennett laughed, but it came out too loud. "Of course you want me to stop. You never want to see what she does. She learned from Grandma how to make paper look clean." That line told me everything. He hated my grandmother for seeing him clearly. He hated me for inheriting her suspicion. He hated paper because paper was the one witness he could not charm. I walked toward the projector, my dress moving softly over the floorboards. The band had stopped playing. No one spoke. Even the children seemed to understand that the room had become an adult place, full of invisible edges. Bennett turned when he saw me. "There she is," he said, "the perfect bride." I took the second microphone from Trevor's table. My hands were steady. "No, I said. Just the prepared one. The room tightened around those words. I did not look at Bennett first. I looked at the guests, then my parents, then Owen, then Denise standing near the side door with her tablet clutched against her chest. My brother is showing you a bank transfer for $68,400, I said. That transfer paid emergency repairs after the March 14th flood 2 years ago. Invoice CR 19-774 covered the irrigation line. Invoice CR 19-781 covered cabin 3. Insurance reimbursement arrived on April 9th and replaced the full amount. I opened the red binder. Here are the invoices. Here is the adjuster's letter. Here is my father's approval code, sent from his phone at 6:12 p.m. on March 15th. Here is the trust attorney's authorization. Mara took the pages and handed copies to the nearest tables. Not dramatically, not like evidence in a television courtroom, like a woman passing menus, except every page landed with the weight of a locked door. Bennett's mouth twitched. She prints things. That doesn't make them true. No, I said. The metadata does. Trevor connected my phone to the second input at Denise's direction. The screen split. On one side was Bennett's cropped transfer. On the other was the full trust ledger downloaded from Marianne Vale's secure archive at 8:58 p.m. The same transfer appeared with its complete memo, 3 linked invoices, and a reimbursement trace. The lie lost its costume. My mother made a sound I had never heard from her. Not a sob, not anger, something smaller. A person realizing the child she protected had brought a blade into a celebration. Bennett tried to click away, but Trevor stepped back with the laptop in his hands. Do not touch it, Denise said. Her voice was calm enough to scare him. Bennett turned toward her. This is a family matter. No, Denise said. A drink was allegedly tampered with on my premises, an unauthorized bartender is behind my bar, and an unknown laptop was connected to my equipment. That makes it a liability matter. I looked at Daniel, the fake bartender. He had stopped wiping the counter. His face had gone loose and gray. Daniel, I said, though I already suspected the name was false. Did Bennett hire you? He opened his mouth, closed it, and looked at Bennett. Bennett snapped, Don't answer her. That was an answer. Denise lifted her tablet. The sheriff's office has been notified. Security is at both exits. If you cooperate, this becomes less complicated. Daniel lowered his eyes. My name is Roy Kessler, he said. He paid me $500 through a Cash App account to replace the bartender during the reception. He said I only needed to keep one glass separate and make sure the slideshow ran. The barn seemed to inhale. My father whispered, Bennett. Bennett pointed at Roy, swaying now. He's lying. Roy shook his head. I have the messages. There it was. Receipts. Owen stood beside me, not in front of me. That mattered. He was close enough that I could feel his presence, far enough that everyone understood I was speaking for myself. He looked at Bennett the way a decent man looks at something he cannot unsee. What was supposed to happen to my wife? Owen asked. Bennett laughed, but his voice cracked. Your wife? Listen to you. She has everyone trained. Roy answered because fear had made him honest. He said it would make her dizzy, emotional. He said she'd cry during the presentation, maybe slur her words, and people would believe the money stuff. My mother covered her mouth. I could have looked at her then. I could have given her the full weight of every year she had called me sensitive, while Bennett practiced cruelty in the open. But the red binder principle had one rule. Do not spend evidence on people who are already collapsing. So, I turned the page. The money stuff, I said, is larger than a crop transfer. Bennett froze. There are moments when a liar realizes he has underestimated the wrong quiet person. It is not always loud. Sometimes it is a single muscle in the jaw. Sometimes it is the sudden absence of performance. Sometimes it is the way a man stops sweating because the body has chosen terror over heat. I opened the next section of the binder. On May 3rd of this year, Someone logged into the trust archive using my father's credentials from IP address 73.18.44.209. On May 7th, that same user downloaded signature pages from 3 older trust amendments. On May 11th, Front Range Community Bank received an electronic application for a $412,000 business line of credit using Copper Ridge Estate as supporting collateral. My father sat down hard. The application listed my email as a secondary contact, I continued, but the recovery phone number ended in 4482. Bennett, that is your old office line. He shook his head. Anyone could have put that there. Correct, I said. So I pulled the access logs last month after Marianne warned me about unauthorized archive activity. The bank application was submitted from the guest Wi-Fi at Mercer Outdoor Supply at 10:34 p.m. The device name was Bennett MacBook Pro. No one moved. Outside, wind pressed against the barn walls with a low wooden groan. The candles flickered on the tables. I could smell spilled champagne, buttercream, and the metallic tang of my own adrenaline. Bennett whispered, "You had no right." To review trust access? I asked. I am an authorized trustee. To spy on me. To catch you. Short, clean, final. Marianne's voice came through the speaker on my phone, amplified through the DJ system. For the record, I am Marianne Vale, counsel for the Mercer Land Trust. I have preserved the archive logs, bank notices, and suspicious loan application for referral. Based on what Natalie has described tonight, this may include identity theft, bank fraud, wire fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to tamper with evidence. Bennett stumbled back from the microphone. The word federal does not need to be shouted to change a room. It enters quietly and moves furniture in people's minds. My cousins stopped whispering. My aunt lowered her phone. My father stared at Bennett as if seeing a stranger wearing his son's face. Bennett looked at our parents first, because he had spent his life using them as cover. "Dad," he said, "you know I would never—" My father stood. "No," he said. One syllable, 30 years late. Bennett blinked. My father's voice shook, but he did not look away. "I do not know that. I used to assume it. There is a difference." My mother began to cry. "Why would you do this to your sister?" Bennett's face twisted. "To my sister? She took everything. Grandma gave her control. You looked at her like she was responsible. Everybody acts like I'm the problem because she knows how to make spreadsheets." "You forged signatures," I said. He pointed at me. "You made me desperate." There it was, naked at last. Not regret, not shame, just the ancient song of the golden child when the ceiling finally falls. "Look what you made me do." Roy Kessler stepped away from the bar as security approached. "I didn't know about forged bank papers," he said quickly. "I only did the glass and the laptop." "Only," Mara said, so softly that half the room still heard it. The side doors opened at 9:12 p.m. 2 Boulder County deputies entered without drama. No sirens, no cinematic charge, just boots on wood, radios clicking, and the sudden understanding that consequences often walk more quietly than threats. Deputy Harlan, the taller one, spoke with Denise first. Denise handed over her tablet, the vendor contract, the staffing discrepancy, and the preserved camera notes. Owen gave him the untouched glass Bennett had intended for me, wrapped in a clean evidence bag Denise had taken from her emergency kit. Trevor turned over the laptop connection record. Mara forwarded the group chat screenshots with the unknown number visible. Paperwork began doing what emotion never could. It narrowed the room. Bennett tried to move toward our mother, but his legs buckled slightly. The substance he had intended for me had made him pale, clumsy, and furious. One deputy guided him into a chair, not roughly, which somehow humiliated him more. "You're all enjoying this," Bennett said. "No," I said. "That is the difference between us." The deputy asked him if he needed medical attention. Bennett said no, then yes, then no again. His pride could not decide whether to perform strength or victimhood. An ambulance was called anyway, because real systems do not run on Bennett Mercer's preferred version of events. While we waited, my father walked to the microphone. He looked older than he had during the ceremony, older than he had at dinner, older than any father should look at his daughter's wedding. "I need to correct something publicly," he said. My mother reached for his sleeve, but he continued. "For years, when conflict happened between my children, I chose the explanation that required the least courage from me. I called Natalie sensitive because it was easier than calling Bennett cruel. I called Bennett troubled because it was easier than calling him responsible. Tonight, my daughter came prepared because we taught her that love in this family was not enough protection." His voice broke. "I am sorry." The apology did not heal me. Not then. Maybe not ever in the simple way people like to imagine. But it entered the room as a fact, and facts mattered. My mother cried harder, but she did not ask me to comfort her, which was the first kind thing she had done all night. Bennett watched from the chair, wrapped in a wool coat someone had placed around his shoulders. "So that's it?" he said. "You choose her?" My father looked at him. "No, I choose the truth." Bennett laughed once, hollow and ugly. "Same thing in this family now, I guess." "Finally," I said. By 10:05 p.m., the barn looked like two events had collided, and neither knew how to leave. Guests stood in clusters near half-eaten cake slices and abandoned champagne flutes. The floral centerpieces still looked expensive. The dance floor still waited. My wedding dress still caught the light whenever I moved, absurdly beautiful under circumstances that had no right to contain beauty. Owen took my hand. "Do you want to go?" That question nearly broke me, not because I wanted to leave, because he meant it. He would have walked me out past every stunned relative, every whispering aunt, every ruined centerpiece, and let the story end in silence if that was what I chose. I looked at the cake. I looked at the red binder. I looked at the door Bennett had been taken through. "No," I said. "We are cutting the cake." Mara laughed through tears. "That is the most Natalie sentence I have ever heard." I took the microphone one last time. "This is not the reception we planned," I said. "A few minutes ago, my brother tried to convince you I was dishonest, unstable, and dangerous to my own family. Some of you believed him quickly. Some of you waited. A few of you protected me before the room gave you permission. I will remember all of it." People lowered their eyes. "For most of my life," I continued, "I was told peace meant silence. Tonight proved silence is not peace. Silence is space. Sometimes it gives love room to breathe. Sometimes it gives a liar room to build." My mother pressed a napkin to her mouth. My father stood beside her, one hand on the back of her chair. "I am not asking anyone to hate Bennett," I said. "I am not asking anyone to excuse him either. Accountability is not revenge. It is the receipt at the end of a transaction someone hoped would stay invisible." Then I turned to Owen. "My husband promised today to choose me in quiet rooms, not only easy ones. He did that tonight." Owen's eyes shone. "So here is my choice. We are going to cut the cake. We are going to have our first dance. We are going to finish this wedding, not because nothing happened, but because what happened does not get ownership of the ending." The applause started slowly, like people were afraid loudness might cheapen it. Then it grew. Not wild, not celebratory in the old sense. Steady, human. The sound filled the barn and pushed against the rafters until, for the first time since 8/17, I could breathe without counting. We cut the cake at 10:18 p.m. The knife trembled in my hand for the first time all night, so Owen covered it with his and whispered, "Together." The buttercream tasted like almond and salt because I was crying by then, quietly, without apology. Mara gave a toast so sharp and tender that 3 cousins cried into their napkins. The band restarted with a slower song than planned. My father asked if he could speak to me near the side doors. I said yes because I wanted to, not because he had earned it fully. He held a cream envelope with my grandmother's handwriting across the front. "Ruth gave this to me before she died," he said. "She told me I would know when to give it to you. I thought she meant when you became older. I think she meant when I became honest." Inside was a letter and an amendment summary. My grandmother had documented concerns about Bennett's pressure on me 3 years earlier. She had restricted his unilateral access after noticing unexplained archive requests. She had also written one sentence that made the barn vanish around me. "Natalie does not need this family to make her strong. She needs this family to stop punishing her for surviving us." I folded the letter carefully. My father cried then. Not loudly, not in a way that asked the room to gather around him. He bowed his head and let the shame belong to him for once. "I failed you," he said. "Yes," I answered. He nodded like the word had weight he deserved to carry. My mother approached, shaking. "Natalie, please." I raised one hand. "Not tonight." Her face crumpled, but she stopped. That mattered too. Respect sometimes arrives long after love and still counts as evidence. Bennett pleaded guilty to state-level evidence tampering and assault-related charges connected to the drink. The federal bank fraud investigation produced a separate plea agreement after the forged documents and wire submissions were verified. He did not receive the spectacular punishment people imagine when they hear a story like this. He received something worse for a man like him. A record. Probation with strict financial monitoring. Restitution. Loss of corporate authority. A suspended sentence that hung over him like a ceiling he could not charm. Mandatory counseling. Public filings. Searchable documents. Every country club handshake, every business meeting, every future loan application carried the invisible sound of paper following him into the room. Control left him first, then reputation, then the family mythology that had fed him for decades. Months later, he wrote me a letter. It arrived in a plain envelope, no return flourish, no expensive stationery. He said he had been under pressure. He said he had felt replaced. He said he did not mean for things to go that far. Near the bottom, he wrote, "I know I hurt you, but I hope someday you understand why I felt desperate." I read it once. Then I placed it in the red binder behind the bank records. Not because I needed to hate him, because I had learned that apologies without ownership are just new drafts of the same lie. Owen and I kept one wedding photo framed in our living room. Not the posed one beneath the cedar arch. Not the cake-cutting photo. Not the first dance under the string lights, though that one is beautiful. We kept the picture Mara took at 11:56 p.m., after most of the guests had gone, when my veil was gone, Owen's tie was loose, my lipstick had faded, and I was laughing with my whole face. Behind us, if you look carefully, you can see the red binder on the head table. People ask if that bothers me. They ask if I wish the photo looked more perfect. I always tell them no. Perfect was the story Bennett tried to ruin. Honest was the one I got to keep. My brother wanted my wedding remembered as the night he exposed me. Instead, it became the night paper told the truth. And if someone in your family has ever smiled for the room while cutting you under the table, remember this. You do not have to win by becoming louder than they are. You do not have to beg people to believe you before the evidence is ready. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay boring. Preserve the glass, save the timestamps, open the red binder, and let consequences walk through the door with sensible shoes and a clipboard. Because the truth does not need a spotlight, it needs a record.